Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories, where today, Karen is trying to sell my family heirloom. I'm 26, female. My dad passed a couple of months ago. He and my mother were divorced, and his second wife passed a couple of years ago, so I was the sole beneficiary of his will. Among his possessions was a painting which was chosen by his late wife to decorate their marital home. It was something of a wedding celebration present. His wife didn't work. My father bought the painting. The paperwork was all in his name, etc., so it was included as part of his estate. His late wife had a daughter, Ellie, who is 27, female. Ellie contacted me some time ago asking if there was any way I would consider letting her have the painting since her mother loved it so much and it had sentimental value to her. I was a little suspicious at this because if this was the case, surely she would have asked my father for it after her mother's passing. But nevertheless, I considered it. The piece is worth, by most standards, a lot of money as it's beautiful, so I wasn't pleased to part with it. But since I never planned to sell it, and it was not a piece that held any special significance to me among my father's collection, I decided I would gift it to her. I let her know I would make the arrangements to have it shipped and straightened out all the paperwork. About a week ago, I get a call from a friend of mine who works at the gallery where my father purchased a lot of his art. She was his dealer. This is how we became friends. She let me know that Ellie had contacted her looking for a valuation and information on selling the artwork that I was going to give her. My friend called me because she didn't know who Ellie was, but she knew the piece belonged to my father as it's one of a kind, so she was concerned about someone trying to fence it. This made me feel like a complete idiot because I thought I was gifting Ellie what she considered a piece of her mother, to essentially gifting her a large sum of money got by subterfuge. I called Ellie to ask her what was going on, and she reluctantly confirmed that she was planning to sell it. I said I wouldn't feel good about giving her one of my father's possessions just so she can sell it, especially after being lied to, and she said that was none of my business, and I should still give it to her anyway, since that money would mean more to her than the painting ever had to me. Everyone I've asked for advice on what to do has some skin in the game, so to speak, so I just want an outside opinion. Am I the jerk for not giving her the painting? Edit. Everyone's asking if Ellie got any inheritance from her mother. She received her mother's small life insurance policy and all her mother's personal belongings. Not the jerk. She wanted to sell something that was super valuable in your family and try to hide it? Absolutely not. Definitely stick with not giving her the painting. Not the jerk. She lied to you and she just wants the money. If your father wanted her to inherit anything, he would have structured his estate accordingly. Not the jerk, and she totally is. If she needs money, she should have just asked for it, not a run and con on her own family. If someone betrayed my trust like that, I wouldn't give them anything. Am I the jerk for asking my girlfriend to make my plate of food differently than she was serving everyone else's? So, I recently became official with a lady I've been dating for 6 months. We decided to have the first barbecue of the nice summer weather in our area at her place. We don't live together currently. Barbecue. She decided to make steaks and baked potatoes, and I made some side salads, and I was also responsible for the drinks and the chips. As my girlfriend got to cooking, it just panned out that she ended up plating and serving to people as her steaks finished resting. When I went over to watch her plating, I noticed she had put butter and herbs and stuff all over the steaks. My family doesn't do this, and I've never seen it done this way, so I asked her, politely, if she would just put mine aside and I would do my own fixings. I just wanted my steak with ketchup. I'm pretty plain. Both she, her sister, and her dad gave me very pointed looks. Later that evening, she said she felt that it was rude to the chef, her in this instance, to ask for my food separately, and that she wished I would have just trusted her to make me a nice plate of food, and that I shouldn't do that when I'm a guest somewhere. I pretty commonly, politely ask for my food to be made differently or more plain when I'm a guest somewhere or at a restaurant, because I generally prefer plain food. I don't think this was rude. Am I the jerk for asking for my own food to be served differently outside my own home? I'm not gonna say you're the jerk, but you're dangerously hovering. She was literally just flavoring the meat, and it wouldn't have hurt at all to try it. It could have been leaps and bounds better than putting ketchup on it. Not the jerk, but you should have tried it. Please, as an adult 25-year-old man, expand your palate. I promise things taste better with seasoning and not just ketchup. Please. I disagree. I'm just gonna say this once. Leave adults alone about their food preferences. I have 50 years of frustration at being looked down on for being a picky eater when the taste of certain foods are just downright unpleasant to me. And yes, I've tried it. I promise, I've tried almost everything multiple times. It still tastes horrible to me. I cannot be more passionate about what I'm saying. People get to have their preference, and as long as they don't expect others to go out of their way to accommodate them, they're fine. And no, asking his girlfriend to not put seasoning on it is not asking her to go out of her way. Not the jerk, but herbs and butter is a pretty common way of treating steaks. You weren't in the wrong here, and your girlfriend handled herself poorly, but this could have been an opportunity to branch out a little. Worst case, it's one meal that you didn't love. You're the jerk for putting ketchup on steak. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his girlfriend? Please let us know. If Reddit boy even dared to ask me to leave something off of his steak, I'd be like, sure, you got it, babe. Am I the jerk for not feeding my husband because he caused me to have an allergic reaction? He technically didn't cause an allergic reaction, but he pushed me into it. I, 26 female, am allergic to a plant that lives in the state my husband and I have moved to. We aren't sure which plant yet, but we're narrowing it down kind of. My doctor has told me to not do any housework whatsoever because I have an allergic reaction every time. Full body rash and swollen joints for like a week. Wearing gloves and protective clothes has not helped. My doctor has told me to not do any yard work whatsoever because I have an allergic reaction every time. Full body rash and swollen joints for like a week. Wearing gloves and protective clothes has not helped. My husband knows all of this. Yesterday he mowed and pressured me into helping him rake up grass and weeds. I didn't want to, and I mentioned that I could have an allergic reaction, but he said that he needed help and that I would be fine. Against my better judgment, I thought that if I just raked and didn't physically touch anything, I would be fine. I didn't want to refuse him when he insisted. Today, I have a rash all over and a lot of swelling, and I feel horrible. I normally meal prep for the next week on Sundays. This morning, I barely threw some salads in Tupperware for next week and called it a day. I eat a lot of easy stuff that doesn't require cooking, so it's fine. My husband, on the other hand, eats like 15 pounds of meat a week, as well as vegetables and sides. It usually takes me hours to cook his food, and it's very draining. I told him he needs to cook his food for the next week because I'm too tired and my skin feels awful. He got mad and said he'd just eat takeout since he wants to relax on his last day off. So now I have to freeze all the meat so it doesn't go to waste. He only cooks once or twice a year. He thinks it's not fair for me to not feed him since I agreed to rake and it isn't his fault I had an allergic reaction. I'm not trying to punish him, but I'm really suffering right now and I just don't have it in me. I also do think it wasn't fair for him to pressure me into doing something he knows I medically shouldn't do. Am I the jerk for not feeding my husband? Edit. Dang, you guys really hate my husband. He's actually a pretty decent guy. I think this post just portrayed him in a bad light. He works 80 hours a week to support me while I go to school, and he still manages to do at least half of the cleaning. I talked to him, and he said his back was just hurting, and he was stressed out from work and he wasn't thinking. He apologized and brought me dinner while I laid on the couch. I'm not doing his meal prep this week because I really just can't, but we both came to terms with it. He'll feed himself, and I'll try to manage my skin as best as I can. It looks awful and feels worse. He's not a lazy guy. He works hard to make things up in other areas. He just hates cooking, which, to be fair, I hated yard work even before we moved to this crappy state where I'm allergic to everything. Not the jerk. He knows you're trying to figure out what you're allergic to. You had a medical reason to not do the raking. He should not have bullied you into helping with the raking. You have the horrible consequences of helping, and he's now experiencing the inconvenient, easy consequence of not having you prep his meals for the week. I'm so angry that he expects you to cook when you don't feel well. He is choosing not to cook. Please do not feel guilty that you are not up to feeding him. He's a grown man. I hope you can treat yourself to something nice when this latest allergy attack is over. Please don't help next time. You may have an allergy attack that's even worse next time. You need to move back to whatever safe state you came from. Your husband and his food can rot. He technically did cause you to have an allergic reaction. He pressured you into going outside and doing yard work when you have no idea what sets you off. But he knows something out there does, and he just doesn't care. And now he's whining that you won't cook for him. Oh my God, not the jerk. Please, please, please rethink this relationship. He insisted you put your health at risk and then blamed you for risking your health and convinced you it's your fault and he shouldn't have to take responsibility for the choices he pressured you into. This is a form of mistreatment and you're falling for it hook, line, and sinker. People like him don't improve, they only get worse. Are you able to move out and away from him? Have you got family or friends you can stay with? Please, if you can, speak to your doctor at your next appointment and tell them how you are being treated at home. You guys are unbelievable. The husband works 80 hours a week. She doesn't work. Maybe he just had a bad day or something. All of you saying that she should leave him are literally unbelievable. Chill out. Am I the jerk for confronting my husband about his sudden changes around the house? I, 40 female, have a habit of taking my 2 kids, who are 8 and 10, to visit my family in a suburban area close to the city we live in during the 1-week break they get at the end of their first semester each year at school. We've been doing that for as long as I can remember. This all started 3 years ago when my kids and I came back from my families. My husband insisted he had a surprise for me and that I would absolutely love it. Once I entered our living room, I discovered he had painted the walls a hideous shade of pink, almost peach, but still mildly striking. I hated it. For context, we own a house far away from the city center to which we go to during weekends and in which I gave him full liberty to do his arts and crafts considering how much he loves doing these things. The apartment I came back to, though, is closer to our jobs and the kids' schools, so we stay there during the week. I acted as if I liked the change and that it's refreshing to the living room that I had previously decorated in muted and monochromatic colors, but that these kinds of decisions should have been discussed prior. He agreed and we moved on. The next year, however, while driving back home from my parents, my husband called and informed me that he had yet another surprise for the kids and I, and that it involved our balcony. I loved our balcony. It was my safe space. I kept plants in there and spent all of my alone time in it, and so I was irritated at the thought of it changing without my knowledge. My husband decided to remove the demi-wall I hung my plants on and replaced it with a green metal grid and put plexiglass on the top area, so the balcony was completely closed now. He also disposed of all of my plants that I've grown particularly fond of. I was livid to say the least, but kept it together in front of the kids and just went to bed since I was already tired. I figured I could just get new plants and not make a big deal out of the situation since my husband seemed happy about it. The next morning at breakfast, a silly argument started between us and my husband started stating all the things I do that he hates. And so I blew up and I told him every single refreshment he had done is hideous to me and that he has no taste in home decor and should stop believing he does. He got mad, stormed off, and is now giving me the silent treatment. Am I the jerk for saying what was on my mind? Not the jerk. Okay, the paint colors were one thing. You don't agree on paint colors, but you're willing to put up with it. He disposed of your entire plant collection without talking to you. What on earth? He threw away living things that you maintain. Not the jerk. Your husband definitely shouldn't have thrown away your plants. If he knows the balcony is your space, then yeah, he should have talked to you before he did anything. He should have talked to you about changes before he tried to do any. The house is owned by both of you, so I do believe a discussion should have happened before he did anything. My husband had to kick out his physical therapist's coworkers tonight. My husband works as a server in a restaurant that is for some reason very popular with the local medical professionals. This restaurant and bar has a reputation of being the place that tends to have a lot of fights and the police called on people. I don't love that he works there, but that's a different story. His managers asked him to kick some people out. The managers had already asked the people to leave and they refused, so they asked my husband because he's a man and a larger build. My husband went up to them to ask them to leave again and the managers were calling the cops. While he did this, someone at the table said, "Hey, don't you have physical therapy at our facility?" My husband was like, and then someone else spoke up. "Yeah, you work with this physical therapist." Then they introduced him to their new medical director. My husband then texted me to complain about how incredibly unprofessional it was for them to bring it up, as the cops are actively being called and they're being evicted. I can't stop laughing because it's just my husband's luck, and we've had some terrible luck recently. Now I'm sitting here wondering if we need to find him a new physical therapist as I type this out. Edit. I spoke with my husband. He doesn't want to report, nor does he want to change therapists. Only so much I can argue with him about. Edit 2. Wow, the Reddit armchair lawyers come out in hordes. I didn't expect this to blow up. I hope all of the judgmental people in the comments never have to worry about multiple medical issues and injuries popping up at the same time. I hope you don't have to worry about keeping a roof over your head because you have thousands of dollars in medical bills. I understand this was a violation of patient-doctor confidentiality, but me and my husband have more things to worry about at this moment than reporting these people. At this moment, it is not an option to try and find a new provider, as this would cause a huge delay in medical treatment. If this was a perfect world, I would report it myself. but it's not a perfect world. I've read through the comments, and I just want to throw out my 2 cents. I'm not a server, but I am a therapist, and I know for a fact that any medical professional acknowledging a patient in public and revealing that the person receives medical care from their facility, like them saying, "Oh, you get physical therapy from this facility?" is a violation of his patient's rights and doctor-patient confidentiality. If your husband felt so inclined, he could contact your state's regulatory board and make a complaint. That's a breach of doctor-patient confidentiality. Report, report, report. It's appalling. Before you even take into consideration the fact that they were behaving so badly they had to be kicked out. I agree. Report it. I'd have a private word with the new medical director. They broke federal law. HIPAA violation, anyone? Definitely report. I guess it's just me, but I would have been laughing with them about it. Yeah, sorry I have to kick you guys out. See you at my next appointment. Am I the jerk for not making pancakes? So my wife is constantly changing something and I don't like it, whether it's the way I cook or the plans I make, for example. Over the past few years, I've had enough. When she starts changing plans or meals, I shut down and walk away from her, letting her finish cooking or whatever task she thinks she's better at. Sometimes she ends up messing it up and I have to fix it later, or she simply doesn't follow my plan or her own. Well, that brings us to yesterday. The night before, I mentioned to my son that it was pancake day and he got excited, as he always does on Friday nights before bed. We have a little song and dance routine and then we head to bed. Yesterday morning, when I went to get things ready, she asked what I was doing. I told her it was pancake day and she got upset and said we have fruit. I said, okay, let's have fruit with the pancakes. Just chop it up. She said no, we didn't need pancakes and we should just eat the fruit because it was going to go bad. I was confused because we had already finished the strawberries and raspberries for breakfast with our oatmeal on Friday. The only things left were a mango and a peach. She got upset, saying I was wasting food. I poured my cup of coffee and went to the living room. About 30 minutes later, my son woke up and flipped out when he realized it wasn't pancake day anymore. My wife said, "You know what? Cook it." I replied, "No, I don't feel like it. You make them." She said she didn't know how to make them as well as I do and got upset because our toddler was throwing a tantrum for pancakes. I told her I was tired of her constantly changing things and then changing them back when it no longer benefited her. I also mentioned that she could deal with our son's disappointment. In the end, she toasted a bagel for him. Oh man, that poor kid. She's still upset that I didn't cook pancakes for my son, but I reminded her that she could have made them herself but refused to. I also told her that she should have explained the situation to our son, and I'm tired of her plans changing and affecting me, and then making me look bad when I refuse to help her after her choices. So, you punished your son by withholding something you knew he was excited about and that he was expecting from you because you were annoyed at your wife? Your wife was nitpicking and arguing not to give your son something he had been promised the night before because she thought there was too much leftover fruit? Everyone sucks here. You and your wife need to pull it together and not let your disagreements spill onto your kids. You each independently owe your son a serious apology. And if you're looking for advice, it seems pretty clear that your strategy of passive-aggressive walking away isn't working. I don't care whether you have a serious conversation with her, set some boundaries, divvy up the tasks differently, get counseling, etc. But this is clearly not a viable solution and your kids are paying the price. Not the jerk. This isn't about pancakes, it's about things going on in your marriage which need to be dealt with and resolved. Good luck. Everyone sucks here. This is just a big power struggle for control. Who's going to be in charge? You're meant to be on the same team and working together. You and your wife can't communicate like adults, so your kid is getting punished. She makes a change and you walk away? What exactly was going to happen if you made pancakes? It was breakfast and y'all turned it into way too much drama. You're both creating problems. No one seems interested in actually solving the problems. Just trying to teach lessons and be in charge. It's totally unnecessary. You're both adults. The problem was not that challenging to resolve. So far, the way you're both managing this problem hasn't worked. Perhaps it's time to do something different. HR Karen insists on changing our relaxed dress code at my job. Big mistake. Howdy, folks. This one took place closing in on 6 years ago. The bosses, at the time, were usually very cool and easy to get along with. However, some Karen got into HR and insisted on changing the work culture to suit her desires and vision. She rewrote the dress code, and overnight, instead of being allowed to show up dressed comfortably, as long as it wasn't dirty, smelly, or full of holes, tech support center, we suddenly had to dress business professional. She even specified the materials the clothing could be made out of. She tried firing almost everyone there for violating dress code, before a manager, one I still love to this day, told her to calm herself because she had not only not published the dress code, it hadn't been approved by management. HR Karen gets upset and pulls strings to get it approved in a couple of days. So in those couple of days, I was reading through the dress code, trying to see what I could do to make her regret it. The dress code, word for word: clothing is to be made of woolen materials only, unless a specific exception is made below. Allowable clothing is listed as business suits, button-up dress shirts, monocolor ties, leather shoes, skirts, and blouses. If wearing a skirt or blouse, silk materials are accepted. Of note, the silk exception was put in solely for her as she claimed that wool gave her hives. Anyway, the air conditioning had been out for weeks, and we had been getting by in the building with big fans and wearing light shorts and shirts. It was a hot summer, so I searched for a loophole in the new dress code. I'm sure you can already see what loophole I found and exploited. Note, despite having lost a lot of weight since then, I am still a hefty, very hairy man, over 200 pounds lost since then, with a very long beard. So day one of the new dress code, on the way to work, I stopped in at a local Goodwill. I bought the most garish skirt I could find that I could squeeze in, with the most feminine blouse I could find. I paid for them and got dressed at a gas station just down the street for the work location. I waltzed into work with lots of stares coming my way. However, I was the only man on the floor not sitting in a pool of his own sweat. Skirts are surprisingly breezy. Less than 30 minutes in, everyone in the building can hear HR Karen screaming at and about me as she runs up to my desk and demands I go to her office for disciplinary action. I tell her I cannot do that as company policy states that disciplinary action can only be undertaken by the employee's team lead and the site manager, not HR. She then screams at both of them to force me into her office. They both give me the stink eye, but I give them a thumbs up and a big grin and say, "Please, please, please, make me go into her air-conditioned office." Did I also mention she had the only working air conditioner on site? So the four of us trudged to her office, with me grinning ear to ear. Myself and many coworkers laughing at this large, hairy, heavily bearded man in a silk skirt walking past everyone. All because I, and they, know how ridiculous I look, and how they know I only pulled stunts at work like this when I am 100% in the right. So we get to HR Karen's office and I sit down. She tells me I'm going to be fired for insubordination and breaking dress code. I laugh in her face and tell her, terminations can only be processed upon agreement by the team lead of the employee, site management, and HR. You are the one that insisted upon and wrote that rule. Unless they both agree, you are lying and can shut up. She was screaming at the top of her lungs at this point. She said it was harassment for me, a big hairy guy, to be dressed like this. Oh, can you point out in the dress code where I can't wear a skirt? As soon as I said that, my team lead suddenly lit up and started giggling as she knew where I was taking this. Karen got out a written copy of the dress code and then started sputtering and stammering as she read it word for word as I typed it above. As she started screaming at me again for being inappropriate, the site manager looked at her and said, "Do you really want to get fired for harassment? He has you caught in a ringer over a barrel of fire, and it would cost us potentially millions." Strangely enough, the dress code was rescinded before the end of the day, and we were allowed to go back to the way we had been dressing. As an extra, she's no longer with the company and has been gone for years now. She made blunder after blunder, usually screaming at me and my bosses, but I always pointed her at the policies she made and got approved, as I was following them to the letter. Am I the jerk for returning the money my husband took from my family for attending our cookout? For context, I'm female 28, and my husband, who's 33, comes from a wealthy family, and he himself has inherited a number of assets from his relatives. One of them is this huge house where we live right now, with a pool and a huge backyard with lots of features. We decided to host our first cookout after we got married 7 months ago, and we invited both his and my family. That was on Friday. Both families came and we had lots of fun, and then everyone went home later. I then got a phone call from my mom, and she didn't sound okay. She asked whether or not my husband took money from his family before they attended the cookout. I was confused, I asked what she was talking about, and she told me that my husband charged every single person from my side of the family who attended the event $25. I was utterly shocked and very angry, and I felt like this has legitimately damaged my relationship with most of my family because almost all of them came over. Not only that, but he got $275 from them. I was so livid, I hung up the phone and confronted him immediately. He told me my family got to enjoy the space and view and said that I should think of it as a resort cookout since this house has lots of luxuries. I told him it was a horrible thing for him to do, and that what made it worse is the fact that his family didn't have to pay like mine had to. He laughed and then reminded me that his family gave him this house. I demanded he give the money back, but he said no, and that he won't even give it to me since the house is technically his. I went and took the money and gave everyone who paid their money back with a sincere apology from me. My husband found out and flipped out at me, calling what I did an overstepping and disrespectful. I told him he shouldn't have taken money from my family for being guests at our house, but he said it's his house and said that he had bet my family has never got to attend a cookout at a house like this and that it was just $25, but I disrespected him and went behind his back and took the money that wasn't mine. We stopped talking after this argument, and he keeps venting to his mom about me taking his money that he earned his own way. Your husband sounds like the world's biggest jerk. Needless to say, not the jerk. Your husband's reasoning makes no sense. Who charges people, let alone family, to come to their house and have a party? Rich people? You don't get rich and definitely don't stay rich by being a nice person. I worked in financing for a few years and often would speak to clients who were wealthy. I learned pretty quickly that there were two kinds of millionaires, nice rich people and jerks. Many of the kindest people I talked to in those years were our wealthiest clients. I suspect that many of them became wealthy because people wanted to engage with them, patronize their businesses, and hire them because they were nice people. There were also definitely clients who inherited wealth and displayed an astonishing amount of entitlement. There were also plenty of clients who would get incredibly nasty about accounts that were worth very little. Those were the jerks. Money doesn't change who you are, it amplifies who you are. I spent decades working in the banking industry. I found that many people got rich because they found a way to hang on to every single penny. Funny you should say this. When I got into the hotel business way back when, it never ceased to amaze me how unbelievably cheap rich people could be. I was venting to my dad about this once. He laughed and said, "How do you think they got rich?" Am I the jerk for leaving my fiancé at the mall after he insisted that I buy him a $350 watch? Me, female 32, and my fiancé, male 30, Aaron, have been together for 2 years. I have a high-paying job and I work long hours. He used to have, a 3-week shift at a job that pays about 5 times less than mine. We're on pretty great terms on everything except money. He's a big spender and spends so much on fancy stuff, although his job does not give him this luxury. He constantly likes and wants new stuff like watches, gadgets, electronics, and car accessories, and I do my best to use every occasion, like Christmas and birthdays and New Year's, to get him the things that he wants. Lately, and after he lost his job, I've been noticing him tagging along whenever I go shopping, then have me buy him expensive stuff right then and there. I end up paying to avoid causing a scene in public because he'd beg me, then start throwing a fit if I refuse. I talked to him about it since it seemed like a pattern, but he said he just happened to see something he liked and thought I could pay for it. I told him that I no longer feel comfortable with this, and that next time he tries to put me on the spot, then have me pay for something that he likes and throws a tantrum if I refused, then I'd walk out and I'd leave him there. He crossed his heart and said he'd never do such a thing. On Wednesday, we went to the mall to get a Father's Day gift for my dad, and we walked by the accessory store. Aaron told me to stop and follow him as he entered the store. I knew this wasn't going to go well because he repeatedly tried on this watch that was worth over $350 and expressed his admiration for it. He then asked if I could pay for it, but I said no and lied about having only $300 for my dad's gift, which is why we were there in the first place. He started going on and on about how cool and catch the watch was, then asked if my dad was more important than him. I looked around and saw people looking at us as he started raising his voice. I told him to knock it off, but he refused and insisted I pay for it. I just turned around and walked out of the store and out of the mall. I got in my car and went home. He started calling me nonstop, but we didn't talk until he got home. He blew up, saying I acted ridiculously and selfishly after he begged me and I refused. He said that I then made a joke out of him by walking out and leaving him at the mall. I told him of what I said would happen if he decided to put me in this position again. He argued that all he was asking for was just $350 and even showed me a small notebook saying he's been writing down everything I pay for so he could pay me back, but I was too selfish to even consider it. He yelled at me about this, then went out to meet his friends. His best friend tried to get involved by shaming me for how I behaved at the mall and hinting that what I was doing was borderline financial control. Am I the jerk? Should I have just paid for the watch? Edit. He said he was going to pay me back, but didn't tell me this at the mall. Don't know if it changes anything since he has no money. Honey, please don't marry this man. Please don't. He will absolutely ruin your finances, if not your life. But let's be generous and forget the money stuff for a second. Focus on how comfortable he is with yelling at you in public. He either has a terrible temper or he knows he can manipulate you by causing a scene. Either way, that's horrific and not something you want to suffer for the next 50-ish years. Getting his friend in on it too is sickening. I'm also 32 with a 30-year-old fiance, and he has never ever raised his voice to me in public because that's not how you treat someone you love. Your guy is using you at worst and a spoiled baby at best. You deserve better and to keep your hard-earned money. Welcome aboard to our newest subscribers, Carol, Winter-Loving Princess, and Tiffanator. Subscribe to our channel and tick the bell for all notifications, and you could get a shout out in our next video.